Hey everyone, Tactics here with another Mythic Amirdrassil boss guide where we're going to be taking a look at the first major step up in difficulty in this raid, SMOLDERON. This is going to be a wall for a lot of guilds, but hopefully everything I give you in this video helps you and your group get it down. We're going to be covering some of the kind of pre-raid setup stuff like WeakAuras and Martinos, those kind of things, the differences you're going to see between Heroic and Mythic here, and just some general tips and tricks, positioning, cooldown timings, those kinds of things that will hopefully help you guys out during progression. I am going to assume, though, you do understand the heroic mechanics, just so I don't waste time covering those, and instead can focus on what's happening on Mythic, specifically where the only real mechanical difference is the addition of the Seeking Inferno orb, and that's where this WeakAura here is going to come in handy for you. The liquid pack, I will link this down in the description. This is now available to people, and it's very, very useful for this mechanic. So let's take a look at how this mechanic actually looks here. If you go onto my VOD here, and we're going to play, we're going to have the first orbs in 15 seconds. Let's fast forward to that. Basically, as you can see here, these orbs, they're going to spawn on the ground somewhere, and they're going to fixate 4 random players. And basically what happens here is that once they reach their fixate target with a red arrow above their head, they will explode for raid damage, and they will apply a vulnerability for 3 seconds on the entire raid, meaning if you ever soak 2 of these orbs within 3 seconds of each other, the entire raid will die. This ability is also a private aura. As you see here, we have this WeakAura popping up, and how this one functioned before the liquid pack was released is players that were fixated by these orbs needed to actually press a macro, and that would talk to the WeakAura saying, hey, this person has a debuff, and then the WeakAura would put you in order and tell you when to soak, basically. So pressing this macro is what populated this list here. Obviously, that is a bit of a convoluted solution. It's not ideal for a lot of groups, but lucky for you guys, like I mentioned, that liquid pack is now available, and somehow their WeakAura wizards were able to kind of work around this. I'm not 100% sure exactly how it functions, and more importantly, I don't know if it's going to get fixed. It very well may be, because it kind of goes against the whole private aura thing of Blizzard. But currently, if it does work, I'm going to 100% recommend using that liquid pack, as it'll shoot out not only a list of the players affected, but it'll also prioritize who should soak. It'll prioritize healers first, and then melee, and then ranged, which is ideal, and something that was kind of hard to do with the macro. You kind of had to say, oh, healers, press your macro real quick. Range, kind of delay pressing your macro, right? So using the liquid WeakAura, it'll sort it accordingly, which is very, very nice, because it can be annoying, especially if healers are late, for example, to kind of ramp through. As a disc priest, I think that was the big thing we saw. It was hard for a disc priest to actually ramp and do his whole ramp and get his healing off if he was the 4th fixate, right? So things like that make it a little bit easier, and so using the liquid WeakAura for that will help a lot. If this ever does get fixed, though, I am going to also link, this is the WeakAura we use for that with the macro. That's the Northern Sky one. That will also be linked in the description, but 100% recommend using the liquid one, assuming it doesn't get fixed. Now, one big thing I also do want to notice, or a note, I guess, about these orbs that a lot of people don't realize is that this orb will apply a dot to anyone it passes through. You can see there, actually, I got one. Boom. That is the 3-second dot there. That is from this one. Sorry, not this one, this one. That is from the orb actually touching me. It applies a dot to any player, not just the ones it fixates. So you want to try and avoid, one, if you're the fixated target, to kite it through like the tank soak as an example, or like the giant melee cluster during the intermission, and that's going to apply additional damage to your entire raid, which can be bad when your raid has healing absorbs on them, right? And you notice here my frame show the healing absorb also in the Northern Sky pack, I believe, maybe in the Amirdrassil reload pack. Regardless, will be linked in the description. But so try and avoid kiting through people, and other people give space to those orbs. If you see an orb coming through, don't just plant in the path of it, right? Take a step back, let it kite past you and not through you, so you can avoid taking that damage. It can be really, really useful to just alleviate some of the stress on your healers. Now, that is really the new stuff in this fight, right? A lot of the difficulty is going to be coming with the timing of the overlaps, the tuning of the damage intake. There's a lot going on, of course, healing absorbs, like I mentioned, on top of that damage intake, and just a lot of stuff to dodge, while also making sure you are positioned correctly to drop this fire. Luckily, timings between each of the boss phases are relatively similar, so it's kind of just a dance. Once you've got it down, you just need to repeat it until you kill the boss. And now one thing I cannot emphasize enough is that this boss fight is actually not a DPS check anymore. It's basically just a can you get everyone to the end of the fight alive check. Helmet enchants are going to be coming out the week after this video is posted. In general, a lot of guilds too are 10 or more eye levels away from the cap. So there's a very good chance that if you're getting to the boss after this video is released, the DPS check is going to be non-existent. So do not for any reason greed for damage on this boss. If you have to lose boss up time to bait fire puddles, to avoid tornadoes, to make sure you're kiting your fire orb, 100% do it. Do not try and squeeze out all that little bit of extra damage. Do not put your teammates in bad situations. Being safe is going to get you the kill 100% faster than a few thousand extra DPS even per player is going to do. Now, that is said, so let's start this over and go through the boss phase dance. On pull here, we're just going to pull the boss at the start of the room, right where you come in, and we're going to rotate clockwise around the room. And basically, how this dance works is it's going to give out 2 sets of pretty much every kind of mechanic. So there's 2 sets of overheated, there's 2 sets of tank soaks, there's 2 sets of fire puddles to bait, and there's 2 sets of mythic orbs, and then you go into intermission. So everything comes in 2 sets. However, the timings between those sets is a little different. So in the first one, for example, all those mechanics happen, and then you have a decent amount of time to bait the fire. In the second set, all those mechanics kind of happen, but the fire bait happens very, very quickly as well, and so you don't actually have a lot of time to bait fire, so you kind of already need to be in position to bait the fire. And how you can fix that is with boss positioning. If you position the boss correctly throughout this phase, you can force people to be in the correct spot for those flame puddles and kind of have good baits, assuming people are like following the boss, which a lot of people end up doing without thinking sometimes. But to start off here, you're going to get overheated into a tank soak, into a delay before the first actual flame like I'm talking about. In terms of how tank stuff is going, you see here, basically 50% of the raid gets targeted by these overheated debuffs, and anyone who is not targeted by overheated goes into the tank soak. Anyone who is targeted by overheated spreads out, as you can see here, though notably the first tank soak is like a little bit weird because there's no existing fire. We have a marker, and that's basically where everyone's going to converge after these overheateds are done, debate the first set of fire here, and then basically successive fire is going to be based on where your previous fire baits were. And so this is a little bit weird of an example to show first, but I'll talk you through it later on in the phase. But as I'm saying, half the raid gets overheated, half the raid does not. It's always going to then switch. So you know, if you got overheated the first time here in the phase, you know for sure you are not going to get overheated again in this specific boss phase. So of the set of 2 in each boss phase, you will always get 1, including tanks. And so what we do here is we swap tanks. Some guilds did this, some guilds didn't. It really just kind of depended. Swapping tanks here so that the non-overheated tank is tanking the boss and gets this soak is a very short timer. However, basically what it does is it means the tank that goes out to drop off their tank explosion doesn't also have the excessive damage from overheated and isn't bringing, you know, weird tornadoes out to the side of the room, because they're already taking a lot of damage. They already have that tank soak, that healing absorb, and so this reduced that tank damage and avoided the weird tornadoes. So we did it, but a lot of guilds didn't as well. So it really is just up to personal preference here. Warren Stones could also be useful if you have augmentation evokers, but they're not mandatory. Like we're going to use a Warren Stone here. He's going to do it. I'm going to taunt the boss back. You know, he's going to run out with his Searing Aftermath. You see the healing absorbs going out, and this is important in terms of positioning here. So we, again, kind of weird because it's the first one, but basically are going to keep a lane clear through the boss this way in future sets, and they're just going to stutter step through the boss to drop those healing absorbs in one spot, and then you're going to see tornado dodge, and everyone is running in to converge. And look how much time we have, right? Like there's a 4 or 5 second gap here between all those tornadoes coming out and baiting this puddle. So that's a lot of time. You're going to notice here on this next one, there was not nearly as much time. So watch the boss positioning here. I take only a couple steps to the side, and then I move and I stand right kind of close to the previous fire. And what's going to happen here is this forces kind of melee and us as the actual tank soak group. As we're walking through, the fire is going to be dropping. If you look at this geyser timer, look at the tank soak. We're going to get hit by the tank soak, and we're going to keep moving through the boss like I mentioned. And here is where you're going to see those kind of overheated positions. The overheated goes out. Again, this is always the people that did not get overheated on the previous set. So same kind of logic follows. If you didn't get the first overheated of a boss phase and you're a ranged DPS, for example, look at where he is. He's already pre-positioned to be back here. This is a good spot to be. And he knows, hey, I didn't get overheated first. I'm going to get it second. So as range, you can pre-position to kind of fill in the gaps of your already existing fire. This is a bigger deal, again, later in the fight when there's a lot of fire down and potentially you have some gaps in your fire. Early on, less of a big deal, but something you can note. And of course, range, you want to give melee all this space right here. This is basically places for melee to kind of stand here just together along this, and that makes their life and their uptime a lot easier, whereas range can keep their uptime by being behind us, right? So we're going to eat that tank soak. I'm going to run away with it, of course. They're going to be running through the boss, which you can't really see because I'm running away. And I'm going to Wernstone back to the boss here. Boom. Wernstone only works every other time. But you can see here how quickly, like, there's already puddles down. The fire is already down, right? So, boom, the fire is already down. So, much, much quicker than the previous set. Boom. At this point, the fire is already baited. The fire is down. You can see that the swirlies are already over there with the fire. And it's spawning as I Wernstone back in. So that's why you want to position so closely to already existing fire, specifically on the second tank soak of every phase. Then we're going to go into the intermission here, but I will talk about the intermission later, I think. Let's keep going back, and let's look at what the second kind of phase looks like, which is basically, again, the same thing, but with, you know, a little bit more fire on the ground. So you're going to see we're going to pull the boss out a little bit. We're going to leave a bigger gap on the first phase here because, again, there is more time to bait. And you're going to see here the tank that ends up taunting the boss and that doesn't get hit by the tank soak, you're going to then pull the boss over into this corner. Also, notably on here, we do use spell wording for healer CDs. So we were doing it, I believe, on our Holy Priest. You can do it on Disc Priest or whoever really that needs to be planting for their healing CDs. Because a lot of times you want to apply those healing CDs to get rid of these healing absorbs very, very quickly. And because there's a very, very dangerous moment of the fight here. And so we use spell wording so that the class that wants to plant, whether it's for their ramp, whether it's to get a channel off, is able to just do that without needing to worry about dodging. So that's what we assign spell wording to in this fight. You can see here, I did not get my overheated, so I taunted the boss off, and now he's going to take this boss. I sit in his spot, I go move, and now I know for sure that I'm not going to get the next overheated, so I am going to get the next overheated, rather. And there, boom, you see, I left, he took the boss, and he walked him a little bit into the corner after these went off. Pools are coming off in 5. These tornadoes, they're dodging, and they're moving back into the corner here to bait all this fire near already existing fire. And you can see I'm bubbled walking through fire because I don't have Wernstone available, and I just want to make sure that I don't bait fire badly. And so if it had spawned on me, it would have been in the middle of already existing fire as opposed to like the middle of the room, for example. So there's that. And again, just moving forward here. We want it to be a little bit closer to the actual previous fire here. So you can see we're going to turn the boss and position this such that we're right close to the previous fire. I'm going to have overheated here. This player is going to back up a little bit to give them a lane to run through. As you can see, it's mostly melee with a ranged filling in the back here at the top right. Look at where range is filling in, and that is for these fire baits, which are very, very quick. We had one bad bait there on the melee, and this is, again, I think partly because we weren't quite as close as we could have been to this previously existing fire, but you're going to see this is not really a bad bait. Like, it's not ideal for sure because we're going to have empty space, but you have a ton of room, and so as long as you are able to kind of not have any baits worse than what that was, you're going to be fine. Plus, you're going to see us run in and fill in these spots in later phases. So that's going to help as well in later on in the fight. Now, intermission. Let's talk intermission. First and foremost, be careful with charges, shadow steps, those kinds of things on this knockback, because you can just get your orb spawning right next to the boss, being like impossible to soak, and give the boss a bunch of stacks. Not good, likely a wipe. You can survive 1, 2, maybe if it's really late in the fight, 3 stacks of the boss getting additional orb soaks. Of course, the boss has his own 5% stacking damage increase, which you can't stop, but eating the orbs, you can survive a couple, but I don't recommend it at all. You really want to get those damage amp orbs on yourself and not give the boss an additional damage amp for the rest of the fight. Now, the other thing to note, soaking these orbs really hurts. It hurts a lot. Like, look at how much our health is getting chunked here initially at the start of this phase. That's pretty common because eating those orbs hurts, because as you can see here, we're still doing mythic soaks at the start of this phase. And so it's very important that you watch your health early on this phase as healers are still ramping, as you're taking all this extra damage from these external sources, plus from the intermission itself. Not a bad place to pop personals if you still have any available, 100%. So keep that in mind. This WeakAura here, I will link it also down in the description. It basically just says the safe zones for every single dance pattern for the whole fight. Pops up, tells you when to gate as well. You're going to be gating on number 2 and number 4 here. And you know that because the safe zones are static on mythic difficulty. I'll show you the gate as a prop paladin. I don't think I take the gate because I don't need to take the gate. I can just eat it. And something else you'll see too is you will likely see a lot of like rogues, maybe even DKs. Now just the rogues, usually cloaking or AMSing to block a stack if they have it available, if it lines up correctly to maintain uptime, that kind of thing. Again, like I said, you won't need to do this by the time you get to this boss with the Helm enchant, with a higher item level. It's not going to be a big deal. You're not going to be needing to greed for that damage, so I wouldn't worry about that. But you see, basically, the pattern is such that everything fills up but the back row, and then everything fills up again but the front row. So that's why you're going to gate out after this one. Boom, you gate out, and then they're going to run back in to the front 2 rows here, sorry. And with a speed boost really is the big thing. So you saw we had the speed totem down already, potentially using roar as well, those kinds of things. And then again, the intermission ends there. There are a couple interesting things you can do with your damage amp orbs, and I can kind of show you because I believe I do it on the first intermission. Yeah, so what you can do to line up your orbs for your cooldown is you can delay your soaking. So you see here, I'm going to try and delay for my wings. My wings is not up for 10 seconds. So I stand back at the start of this intermission. You see, I purposely move away from the boss here to spawn my orbs further back. Boom, and then I will use a speed to get back into the boss, do some stuff, waiting for my wings to basically come off cooldown here. Boom, wings is off cooldown. I pot, I send my wings, and then as they kind of come in, I'm going to turn around and get all of my soaks. And that's something else to note. As I gain soaks, the debuff duration does not increase. So once you start your first soak, you want to make sure you soak them all relatively quickly. I could have done that a little bit faster, honestly. You don't want to try and, oh, I'm going to soak one and I'm going to soak the rest later. That actually is terrible. Once you've started your soaking, you need to soak them all. So it just matters how long you delay your first initial soak. That is the biggest thing here. And again, depending on your cooldown timings, you can do this earlier, like immediately. You can do this later, like I did here. You could even, if you did further back, you could have stood and do it even later. So that kind of thing. So it really just depends on how you want to line it up with your cooldown. So something to keep in mind there. Pots as well. Like I said, I potted here and in the 4th intermission phase burn. Some people do on pull and in the 4th intermission. Just kind of depends, again, where your CDs line up. This is going to be unique for kind of every spec in the game. So you're going to have to do some research there and see. Bloodlust usually is going to be on the 3rd intermission that we've seen, around 4.5 minutes into the fight. And the big thing, too, to note with this intermission is it is technically quicker than the others. There's 2 extra detonations, I believe, of the ring here. But it's all you see here from the WeakAura. 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. You're bouncing back and forth. So it's quite easy, but it's much faster. So don't let that catch you off guard. The 3rd intermission is faster, but because it's so easy, you do Bloodlusted here. And usually this lines up, I believe, with some cool. It's 4.5 minutes, but you have a damage amp, so it's worth anyway. Some people, again, will be holding. Some people won't. You're going to have to like look into your own unique specs, kind of timings for this fight to kind of figure out how that works. And again, here, we're going back into another boss phase. We can look at the late boss phase here. Just kind of see how it works. Like we have a lot of fire on the back here to fill in. So you're going to see these range already pre-moving to kind of fill in this back area as an example, where you have to be able to adapt to where your fire is. What does our fire look like? Look, there's a ton of space here. Range goes and fills that in. And like I said, melee is all here around the boss to just maintain uptime during the phase. And there's just a clean lane right here. Again, easy to show here for the debuffed, tank debuff players to kind of stutter step through as their tank debuff healing absorptions get healed through, and you drop puddles on the ground here. Tornadoes, something for dodging tornadoes too. Can be a little easier sometimes to step into one of your friends like right beside you as a melee player, one of their circles. You can see here, boom, you see the tornadoes go off, and like some people, you'll see like do a little sidestep into their friend zone or whatever, just to make it a little easier. See, I get hit there. If I had stepped to the right, I don't think I would have been hit. So something to note there. Another thing to note is the direction these tornadoes actually fire is based off the direction your character is facing. And so there is a WeakAura. We didn't use it. There is a WeakAura, though, that will show lines, I believe, that shows where these will shoot out. But basically all we did is just make sure, as players on the outside edge, we face the center of the boss room. And that shot our tornadoes out in a relatively easy and predictable way. Again, I stepped forward. If I didn't step forward, I wouldn't have walked into that tornado. If I had instead stepped to the right or left a little bit, would have been just fine. But that is kind of how we handled it. But again, if you want that WeakAura, I'm sure you can find one. Again, I don't have one, but it does certainly exist, and that's just how the baiting, or the aiming rather, of the tornadoes actually works. And again, it's rinse and repeat here. Do not forget, really, really important too, and this will save you a lot of wipes. You can only be targeted within phase by overheated a single time. That means if the first one goes out and you aren't targeted, you know for sure you're going to be targeted the next time. And you can position accordingly. You can pre-position before it even comes out. If you are targeted the first time, you know that for sure you're not going to be targeted the second time, and you need to get into the tank soak. So that means you can pre-position to be in the tank soak. There is one thing that can happen that is a little bit weird though, and that is if you are targeted by the first overheated. So you are an overheated, which means you are going to want to soak the second tank soak, but then you get picked by an orb and you're late in the orb soak rotation. You are better off not getting in that tank soak than trying to, maneuver around and potentially pop your orb early while trying to get in that tank soak, right? So you're going to lose some damage from the damage amp because you're not going to be able to get your orbs debuffs rather, but you're not going to wipe your raid. So something to keep in mind, that is a potential that can happen. It doesn't happen too often, but it can happen. So be aware of that. And again, make the safe decision. Damage is not going to be important here, so you need to just make sure you are kiting away from your group. That does mean people in the tank soak are going to take additional damage because you're going to have only 9 in the soak instead of 10, but usually that's not too big a deal, even with the damage amp. So would recommend that instead of potentially wiping your group at all times. Again, here, looking where I'm running out all the way out here to try and bait this fire. We don't get it, but again, this is all you need. You're going to see here, for the last phase, you just want one clean path here, and there's the other lock gate, just again for the same combo. It's the exact same as combo number 2, I believe, but again, just follow the WeakAura. It tells you in the gate and whatnot. But you just need one little clean column, and that's all you need for that final phase. And then the enrage happens, and you just kind of stack in the center there again in that one safe spot, and you're good to go. But that is it for this guide, guys. Hopefully it helps you and your guild get the Smolderon kill, and if it does, be sure to subscribe for more raid and dungeon guides, both in this patch and beyond into the War Within. If you have any questions, please drop those down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Plus, don't forget to come and stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all of my raid progress and keep pushing from a tank's perspective. As always, big thank you to my supporters over on Patreon. Could not keep creating content without you guys. Thank you to everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.